All right, well, this is Aaron Squire coming to you guys again. We've got episode 95, and I'm trying to put together a new intro, and so it may or may not be on time for episode 100. But tonight on Decking with the Squire, I've got a new guest, his very first time. Ducklett's here with me. Unfortunately, his camera isn't that great, so we have this awesome picture for you to look at. Yeah, maybe I can animate it by moving it around or something. I don't know. Something like that. Tonight on Deck Mode the Squire, we're going to talk about the Reddit 3K subs. We're going to, of course, talk about some of the top commons that we think that new players are going to want to buy. You know, either go get them with gold or get them in the auction house for, like, you know, a couple of pennies or whatever. And then, of course, Koma won the $100,000, or basically the $40,000 prize of the $100,000 prize tournament last week, so congratulations to him. We'll talk about that a little bit. There wasn't too much news on the Hex side, but first, let's start in talking to my good new friend here, Ducklett. Ducklett, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm actually pretty excited.
I know, right? so, tell us a little bit about your history with card games and stuff.
Okay, I started playing Magic when I was the age of, I don't know, I think it was before my 8th birthday. I got my first starter pack.
What set was that in?
Oh, I think it was, I had the
Ice
rule
Age?
book somewhere. I think it was 4th
Oh,
edition.
wow, yeah, okay, yeah, I started in
It was in a Borders, like it was like in one of those glass cases at Borders, like you're like
Sure.
about to turn 8. Oh my gosh, it looks so exciting. But ever since then, like I've had lulls where I've stopped. I came back in high school to play, like try to play competitively. It was Onslaught, I think. No, Mirrodin was the set that had just come out.
that was a bad set.
About 10 years ago, like a very, very close friend of mine opened a gaming store here in town. It was pretty much the only store here in town. We have a pretty big city. It's right out, like, suburb of Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
So when he started up, I started working for basically free. Like, I was just trying to help, you know, as much as I could. So I learned literally every board game, card game, pretty much anything that people would come in and ask about, you kind of have a knowledge base about. So, like, Magic, Spoils, WoW TCG, WoW Minis, Epic, all of it. Like,
Lots of products out
we
there.
did everything. We ran the events. I was, like, I mean, they ran the D&D encounters for a while. I was the DM of that for the store, and ended up being like the most played DM in like all of Florida or something based on the events I ran. So that was pretty cool. They sent me like a pack of stuff. We traveled all around town for events. We've done a lot. Like I queued for the Epic World Qualifier twice and top forward 6 times because, like, I don't know, that game was my jam for some reason. Like, no, it didn't really ever take off. They actually sold all the rights to their game property to Wizards, and the guy that made it actually went to go work for Wizards Development.
Sure.
But it was a pretty cool game. But that's pretty much it. I've done, like, you could ask me almost about any card game, and I have at least a little bit of knowledge about it.
Right. Did you know of Trick Jarrett when he was down there? Because I know his store was down there too, right? You know what I'm talking about?
I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the, like, my buddy knows them all. He played on the pro tour for a very long time. He's close.
Well,
he's
he
very
wasn't
close
super
friends
pro.
with
He just did a lot of
yeah.
like, he just did a lot of like content, and now he's like, I believe he's a community manager for Wizards.
Yeah. I do know Sheldon. I've been to his store once in Tampa, Armada Games. He's a pretty cool guy. I mean, I don't agree with everything he does for rules wise, but he's a really nice guy.
Sure.
Level 5 judge. I think he's like the highest judge in Magic right now. But
so being like a brick and mortar store type of worker person, so what brought you over to the Hex side of things?
Honestly, what brought me to Hex was Pentachills. I've known him for forever. We've played a lot of games together. We played, like, pretty much like a list games we played together. But he was, you know, he knows that I'm a big card game guy. Like, that's
right. So you knew him in real life, or you just met him?
No,
online?
I met him through a friend of mine.
Okay.
Because I'm in Orlando, he's in Canada, so.
Well, yeah, it's a bit of a, you know.
He's like, there. I know you're a big Magic guy. You should try Hex out. He got me one of the Slacker. He got me a Slacker backer for birthday. So I've been playing since the beta on and off. But once Set 3 came out, I really started, like, drafting a lot and playing a lot, and, you know.
Yeah. We're getting a question in the channel. So just so you know, this is Ducklett. He is our guest for tonight. His camera isn't the greatest. This is a picture of him at a wedding or something, making a pretty awesome face, I must say.
Yeah.
So he's just talking about some of his experience. So what kind of content are you doing for? You're working with us at 5 Shards now, right? You're helping us out a little bit.
Yeah. I got invited by Penta to do editing about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago now. So I've edited quite a few of the articles. Like pretty much, that's what I do for work. I do a lot of editing and databasing. So
right, that's your expertise.
Yeah, I've I've edited pretty much everything under the sun. Business documentation, almost to the point of like paralegaling. I've done articles for a writer for a newspaper. I've done books, short stories that are on Yahoo, or not on Yahoo, but Amazon. Like I've done a lot. Yeah. So
are you planning on doing any content anytime soon for like Twitch TV or anything?
I have started streaming on Hex Ducklett. I streamed on and off for the last couple months. Usually when, I try not to stream when the other guys are streaming because I like to watch.
Right.
And B, it almost feels like cannibalization of the viewership, so
yes and no. I mean, obviously people do different things, right? So
correct,
if you're going to watch certain people, they're going to be maybe more casual or maybe more experimental, whereas other people are going to be more maybe PvE focused, and then there are of course all the competitive players, which are just going to play the hardest decks that they can, so there's definitely a lot of, there's people that are playing constructed, and there's going to be people that are going to play all of your drafts and limited, and so I don't really see it as being too much of a problem. The only thing I like to do is make sure that people know that there's other people to go to and to support them too, and so I try to promote as much as possible.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, I feel like that's the right way to go about things. I don't think that you're wrong at any point, but I don't know, like I have feel like I've started to do more streaming regularly. I've been helping a lot of our buddies learn how to play recently, and they've been trying to stream while I've been teaching them, so you might have heard my voice there too.
Sure.
Same thing with Penta. We've both been trying to teach as many people as possible.
Yeah, the more the merrier. I don't look at any new person entering as competition. I look at it as growing the hobby, because honestly, I would love it if Hex was on Twitch 24/7, and that the only way that's going to be possible is if we have a ridiculous amount of streamers that are able to do that.
I agree. I feel almost like that, like you would when you are working at a brick and mortar store. Like you never want to push people out the door. The bigger the community of the store, the better.
Yeah.
The better networking you get to do. The more events get to fire. You get to see different perspectives when you're drafting with different people. It is a community based game, I think, from start to finish, and you never actually make your community better by pushing people out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I actually saw that happen recently in my local community, where I guess there was a store, and this is like the craziest thing I've heard, is someone was in there and they were trading cards with someone because they didn't want to spend the money. They were trying to make some trades to get the play sets of the cards that they needed, and the store owners, I guess, told them they couldn't trade in their store. And I was like, that's ridiculous.
I have heard horror stories.
that's pretty bad.
There is a store in Orlando that for a while people had to go outside and trade out of their trunks, because if they were caught in the store trading, they would they'd ban them. Yeah, they'd just be like, go somewhere else. All they can do
is just ban them. So yeah, kind of makes me feel pretty bad. Anyways, something that we can do to make everyone feel good is we can do the giveaway for the YouTube people. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is the most active YouTube comment section in the last week that I've ever had. We had like 24 messages. Now, some of these were me back and forth with one particular customer, and so he was looking at some different things, and this is really what I want to facilitate with my YouTube channel, is being able to talk back and forth with people and have you guys comment on the episodes and suggest things and give me decks to build. And so I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. So let's go ahead and roll this off. Now, if you do post multiple times, it doesn't count multiple times towards the dice roll, by the way. So we have to count up. So let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You have a big enough dice.
7. I have 7 people. We're stepping it up. We're stepping up from the 6-sided dice up to the 8-sided dice. That's pretty awesome to feel that. That's a hefty piece of dice right there. And all right, so it's a number 6 person down. So we're gonna go Zimic, and I believe he's in channels here, so he's gonna get the draft pack this week. Make sure you're commenting every week on the YouTube and tell me what you like and don't like, and even if you're gonna, I mean, don't be derogatory, but even if you dislike what I'm doing, you can hate on me a little bit, but everybody that comments gets a chance at a draft. So this time it was Simic. So free draft. Winner.
Congratulations, buddy.
Yeah, he'll probably get to me at the end of the episode. And of course, we do the live giveaways after the show, so do stick around for those. Let's move on to some of the news at hand. So obviously last weekend we had the Hex Invitational. I was watching from home. I was watching everyone have fun. Apparently I have one of those jerseys on the way to me, so I'm going to get one of the cool 5 shards jerseys that everybody was wearing at the tournament.
I think they look great.
And my boy, last week, not to say I had anything to do with it, because I really didn't, but I wanted JJ to go far, and I was really worried for him in that day one. To me, he was the Cinderella story of the tournament. In fact, even just looking at his deck list going into it, I was like, I don't know about this one. But he really punched it through there, and he came in second place with $20,000, and then Coma took it home with a Winter Moon deck. And so a lot of people now are saying that the meta is going to really shift towards that Winter Moon, and so it's going to be a lot of, make sure you're ready to deal with Winter Moon. So any comments on that? What were you doing last week? I was doing a lot of tweeting on it.
I was watching. I thought that the story of JJ going from what he was in the elimination with Satalution, right?
Yes.
Like
yeah,
I remember that match, and I was like, man, he went from barely
losing,
like right on the fringe to he was right in it there even at the end.
Yeah.
Like that's just incredible. I think that was one of the great parts of the way that the tournament was set up, was like you could go from 0 to hero right there. Like I thought that was awesome.
I was actually a little bit worried about the limited, because I feel like that should have been a separate tournament. That should be, I really feel like those formats should be separate, but I think it worked out all right, because top 4 and limited, okay, I can deal with that. I think that's all right.
I feel like I've heard arguments both ways. A lot of people were upset, like, the guy that was 4-0'd, we didn't really get to see him that much on day 2. But when you think about it, 6 of the 12 people that got invited so they're on limited. They played a sealed and then they played a draft. So it makes sense that like you'd have at least both of the things that got them there to be in the spotlight for the event itself.
Right. Yeah, I think in the future, once our base of people that are playing the game grows a little bit more, and we'll probably have separate ratings like other card games, where you'll have a limited rating and you'll have a constructed rating, and maybe some sort of a card, like every card that has ever been printed rating, something like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. A limited rating and like having them separate for a rating system would be fantastic, and then you could always have the composite rating or whatever word you'd like to use for that.
So there was a bunch of cards that were spoiled. Go over to 5 shards, and they have the complete spoiler list of all the cards that were shown. I'm not going to go through a lot of them because we did that last week. There is one that they posted on the update this week. There was a couple that they showed that they spoiled during the cast, during the $100,000 tournament last weekend. But this is Infinity Engine. It is a 4-cost artifact engine. It says it enters play exhausted, and then at basic action speed, which means you can use it in either your first or second main phase on your turn. You can exhaust it, and then it says exhaust one or more other cards you control, and then gain 1, and that's a temporary resource for each other card exhausted this way, and that lasts until the end of your opponent's turn. Actually, those temporary resources, I believe, they don't go away at the end of your turn. They go away at the end of your opponent's turn. So it seems, I don't know, combo-y kind of a card. Like maybe in the future there'll be something that takes a lot of advantage of this. Maybe there'll be some sort of shin hair, dump a lot of little dudes in play, and then use them to gain all these temporary resources, and maybe do some sort of a fireball in your opponent's face. Burn to the ground your opponent's face for like 20. I don't know, maybe something like that, but I'm not really a big fan of this.
We might see some more troops like that Sapphire Engineer in set 3 that when he readies, you draw a card. Maybe we'll see more of that kind of effect coming sooner or later. So that
Right.
you have an
An
exhaust
infinite
engine.
loop. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the only other thing I could see is like there's like some sort of infinite loop where you have dudes that exhaust, and then when they exhaust, that triggers something else, and that unexhausts this, and then when that happens, that unexhausts all your dudes or something, and then that's 4 cards. That's way too much.
I mean, sometimes you got to play a 4-card combo just to say you did.
4-card combos are not good. Moving on, there was it looks like a kind of like a short story. I haven't read over this, but I'm going to see if I can get some time later to do so. Probably some potty time later. That's usually when I do a lot of watching of the Twitch and other things. But seems like an interesting short story. I guess it's about the orcs and the venom, right? I mean, that's what I'm seeing here, but just point it out. You guys can read it in your leisure. I'm not sure what it's about. Has anybody read this? Probably not.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance. I just saw it when you mentioned it to me earlier.
Yeah. Moving on, in Reddit, I just wanted to say we are at 3,015 readers as of right now. Those are people that are subscribed to our channel. So if you aren't subscribed over at Reddit, I'm one of the admins over there. So just get out there and check it out. It's a nice alternate forum. Also use the Hex main forums. Use those as well. But the Reddit forums are nice just because things are a little bit maybe more orderly in my opinion. You'll get some other newer faces. Things become more publicly viewable, whereas like the Hex forums are less in the spotlight type of thing. But on the forums, I had a user that asked me, or asked the community rather, like with the cards that they had in their collection, could we build a deck? So that's what we're going to do tonight. But with the 3,000 readers, I haven't seen any of the other digital card games besides the top 2, which are of course Magic and Hearthstone. I haven't seen them, the other ones, really get to that level yet. So I think it's a great step forward, and hopefully, if we can get maybe up to 4,000 readers, we can be a solid like 3rd place. I mean, we're far away as far as our users from the big dogs on the block, but I think it's great to be in that solid 3rd position. So that way, people can be like, yeah, if you like Hearthstone and Magic, maybe try Hex type of thing.
I don't think there's anything wrong being 3rd between those 2 powerhouse franchises, honestly. Like,
oh yeah,
even remotely being in the conversation with those 2 means that you're doing something right.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is obviously there's other card games out there, like was the one I mentioned before,
Duelist and Soulforge, and
there's a bunch of them, and
nobody on like Wastelands almost.
I mean, if we can get to where there's a good space between us and those other ones, and like user base and that sort of thing, I think that really, I really want to solidify that 3rd place spot, and then we can just keep growing and growing and growing. So I think it's a good thing.
Like, not only is like it's a big mark to hit 3,000 subscribers, but man, it seems like the viewership has also kicked up the amount of comments being dropped on some of these threads too. It seems like there's a lot more activity overall.
Yeah. For sure. Okay, so one of the things that was that the let's see, his name is, I should probably actually say his name is Epic Spirit. This is the person from Reddit. They asked, this is their collection for what they have in Hex right now. And so one of the first things I did was I just kind of looked at the rares and the legendaries that they had available. And so this also led me to think about, well, with new players, we should probably talk about some of the cards that every new player should get in the common range. Like the cards you should go and either spend gold or spend a couple of pennies on and get your playset. And that's, of course, 4 cards, the 4 of cards. So let's look at what they've got in their rare range right off the bat. And this is going to kind of nicely segue us into the deck building of the night. Of course, I'm always up for building anyone's deck for them or give me an idea. I like it if you put it on TCG browser, but if you can't do that, then that's not too much of a problem. If you can at least get me a picture or something or a list, I can usually figure it out and get back to you. So But looking at his list, I'll go ahead and post his collection so everyone can see that one for themselves. They just spoiled a new card on the front page. Okay, well, we'll get back to it another time. So we don't have that much to look at, but he does have a couple of rares and legendaries. I'm seeing the Darkspire Tyrant, which, you know, we could try to build something Darkspire, but that's classically been not amazing.
That's 4 Orc legend or rares there. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Luck.
He does have Gorton Zuma, so if we did decide to build Darkspire, we could build Darkspire Sacrifice with Bunjitsu. We could try to go that route, and that way we can buff, you know, Gorton Zuma and Darkspire Tyrant. The problem I have with a lot of the Darkspire cards is that you're just very, very weak bodies, because you have the 2/2 and the 2/1, and the other one's really not that playable because he's just vanilla.
Oh yeah.
And then we have 2 Highlands Blackbelts. Now this is another one we could do. This is the human. So maybe go some sort of a human aggro route. We could either maybe try to build tokens, Ruby Diamond tokens, or we could maybe build just straight up Ruby aggro. He did say aggro or combo. Typically combo and control decks tend to be on the higher side, the more expensive side of something you're going to build. So aggro is a lot of times that's people's first decks, their first love, and then eventually they move into the more expensive decks like those. So what are you seeing so far, Doug?
I think that with, I don't know, I'm not a big fan of the Darkspire strategy either, but it does seem like he has a pretty good, maybe like Blood Ruby aggro deck with double Black Belt and the Orcs. Like Fury is pretty good with you could put like the Major to return a troop from the crypt when he hits, and maybe give him the unblockable except for by blood troops. That seems like it could be something, especially if you're constantly hitting him in the face with all these aggro cards. You get him pretty cheap pretty quick. I think that I feel like just seeing the couple rares that he has, he seems like he did pretty well pull wise. I mean, you got Thunderfilled Elder's good. I mean, I understand that's not very much an aggro card, but you know, he got some at least interesting cards for somebody who's new. I think he got quite a bit lucky there.
Okay, so right before we start the actual building of the deck for Epic Spirit, we are going to talk about some of the commons that you must buy if you are new to the game. So this is going to be a great episode for people that are completely new and they're like, oh, I really want to play competitive and I want to get in, so what do I need to get? This is going to really set you up for success, because these are staples that go in a lot of different decks, a lot of them. And if they aren't, we're going to mention that. So let's go ahead and pull up the... We did this by shard. I didn't do any artifacts in here. Some of that was just because of time, but some of that was just because artifacts in general, there's not too many staple artifacts that go in a lot of decks, except for the one that deals 2 damage, I believe. That's pretty much the only one that I could...
Sapper's Charge.
Yeah, Sapper's Charge is the only one. And that one, pretty much it only sees play as a one-of in a Winter Moon deck. So we'll start off with the blood. So we're starting off from the top. So we picked out Murder, Crackling Rot, Giant Corpsefly, and Inquisition. So Murder is pretty obvious. I mean, Murder, or it's now Kill, rather. I said Murder. We had to change the name to Kill, but Kill kills troops. I mean, 1 for 1, it kills troop. I have a background in playing the Star Wars card game, and there were cards in there like Darth Vader, and Darth Vader was stupidly hard to get rid of. That's one of the things I love about card games like this one, where they allow us to have commons where, you know, I may not be able to pay for a really big Uranos. Like, I may not be able to spend the real world money to buy him, but at least I have a card that can deal with him. That's common. You can see that it's only worth 4p, and then it's about 800 gold. And so Kill is kind of a must type of a card. I'm just going to go through all of these, and then we'll get Duck's opinion on them, just to save some time. Crackling Rot's another piece of removal. This one's probably less important for you because it just doesn't... It's not as necessary these days. It does gain you a charge, which is pretty nice. It's just a nice piece of removal. Another one is Giant Corpsefly. There he is, Giant Corpsefly. Giant Corpsefly is one that we saw in a lot of mono blood decks early on, and if you don't have a lot of great cards, like playing 3 or 4 of these, this is not that bad because your opponent, it forces your opponent to make some choices, especially if it's a Sapphire opponent, where it is that they're going to have to do, you know, like a lot of their removal is like bounce your troop, and they're not going to want to bounce this guy. Plus, it has flying, so it has some evasion. Just really super solid troop. This is a card back in set 1 that I think was undervalued, and then has recently just it sees play. And then the final one was Inquisition, and this is kind of a no-brainer because this is going to break up a lot of the slower decks out there, a lot of those wild decks that are playing the really big troops. You can just dump those troops out of their hands, so you don't have to worry about them in the late game as much unless your opponent top decks them. It breaks up combos. It does a lot of things. It's basically like an early counter magic for your opponent's stuff. So, Duck, any thoughts?
I think you hit pretty much everything. I always have been a guy that likes to see hand control like Inquisition, simply because that's like the closest thing Blood's going to get to a counter magic, and it facilitates in a lot of the same ways. You get rid of a card before they even have the chance to resolve it. And, you know, it just deals with things that Kill can't in the Blood Shard. And Kill is just, you know, your catch-all. A thing is so important for any Blood player, really. It's just your best thing. I can deal with it. You can't really get much better than that.
Moving on to the Diamond Shard, we've got not a lot of troops in here, just because it feels like most of the troops that you're going to want to play in the Diamond Shard are either uncommon or rare or legendary. Most of them are rare and legendary, honestly. So Diamond feels like it's the most new player unfriendly shard, honestly, like as we took a look at it as from the common perspective. But it's a lot of solid pieces of removal. Inner Conflict hasn't seen a lot of play since set 3 has been released, just because there are better things than it, but it's still a solid piece of removal that, you know, just forces that troop not to, it can't attack or block. Now, it doesn't deal with things like Reese the Crust Crawler very well, and it doesn't deal with Azure Fate Sorceress, because you just need to get rid of both of those things as soon as they hit the field. So do be aware of that. So it's still useful, but not as good as some of the other cards like Pride's Fall. Pride's Fall is going to deal with those really big wild troops fairly well, especially at quick action speed. So this has been almost like a staple 2 of in a lot of people's competitive decks. If you do happen to get, what is it called, Martyr, this also kind of combos with that a little bit, because it pumps up your opponent's troop into a range where it is that you can Pride's Fall them. Whereas they might not have been there before. Probably the #1 common for Diamond is probably Repel. Repel, of course, destroys attacking troops. It pretty much does what Murder does, but only when your opponent makes the mistake of attacking you with 2 resources open. So a smart player can play around Repel, especially if they see you play one early in game 1, but it's still a solid piece of removal. And then finally, Meek. Meek is pretty active removal for a lot of 2 power or less troops, so it does deal with Azure Fate Sorceress and some other things that we do see from time to time, but it's not as good as some of the other things that you probably could run, like Repel or Pride's Fall. Duck, over to you.
Yeah, I feel like Meek and Pride's Fall are almost like brothers. Like one does half the job, the other tries to go for the other half. You know, there's a small window of troops that can kind of survive both those cards. Like Brown Fox Scout, I guess, is a very good indicator. Yeah. But Repel is fantastic. I think that it's probably the best of all the commons in Diamond that I can really think of. I just think it's in a lot of ways it is kill. I mean, I understand there's a drawback to it. However, it is cheaper. So, you know, when you're sitting at that 4 or 5 threshold, it gives you way more options than kill does to have another play with it. Inner Conflict, I feel like it's hit or miss. It's kind of like the the younger brother of Solitary Exile, which unfortunately is an uncommon. But
sure,
you know, when you just don't have, you know, when you're a newer player, you just don't have the cards. I think it's a fine answer to a lot of things.
Next, moving over to the Ruby Shard, we've got Skewer was my first one, and these aren't in any particular order. I'll put them in an order when I post them on the YouTube and then on the 5 Shards page. In my actual, like, I have to take some time and go through like my best #1 pick and then my #4 pick. But this Skewer is probably not a high pick for us, but it still does a decent amount of damage, especially if, I don't know, you decide to do Tricolor and play it with a Winter Moon and cycle it into your deck. Could get rid of a lot of X1s and deal that extra damage, something like that. But it's just a solid piece of removal at quick action speed. The nice thing about a lot of the Ruby cards is that they are quick action speed, so you can do them in response to your opponent playing a card that may have been a combo with another card, or you can do it in your opponent's end step and then keep resources open, allowing your opponent to think that maybe you had a counter magic or something else to do in their end step. Moving on, we've got Crackling Bolt. Now this one is a lot more playable to me right now, especially just because it's 2 resources. It's basic action speed, which again means you can only use it during your first or second main phase. Dealing the 3 damage and gaining that charge, though, that can be a really big deal, especially in charge-heavy decks like we had the Azure Cannon, where you have Azure Fate Sorceress that's trying to get up to 6 charges so they can play that Rock Elemental, put it into play, and deal all this damage to your opponent's face. So Crackling Bolt just goes into a lot of things. Also, the threshold is much, much better than Skewer, being only 1 Ruby threshold, so that's just much easier on the eyes, I guess you could say. And then, of course, the final one is everybody's favorite, Burn. Burn is a card that is, Corey Jones has quoted as being the most sold and traded card on the auction house since the inception of Hex. It's a staple. Like, most every card game has this. Deal 2 damage for like 1 resource. Like, this is a staple. It does it at quick action speed. Deals a lot of with X2s, and when we say that, that means like any power and then 2 toughness or less type of thing. But we have seen a lot less X2s in competitive play recently, so Burn has kind of gone down from 4 of, down to 3 of, down to about a 2 of when it does get played. Duck, what do you think?
One thing about Skewer, and I guess it's something that I learned quickly teaching new people at the store, was that a lot of new players will look at Skewer and look at Crackling Bolt and ask, why would I not just always play Crackling Bolt? And while they have a point, sometimes newer players don't really understand the value of options. And it's a quick action, which lets you do a lot, but the versatility of it sometimes, like, either you can use it as your Ruby way to do 3 to something, or you have the option of doing it to a 1 toughness creature and still getting the value of hitting them for 3. I think that is something that sometimes is not as understood for newer players that would just think that Crackling Bolt is just always the better card. But Burn is by far, like, it's the king of commons in Ruby. I just, you know, there's not much better than, you know, your go-to 2 damage for 1 resource.
I'm gonna skip over Sapphire because that's the one that was like the king of commons that we found. But right now we're gonna go to Wild because it is the common dry zone. Honestly, like, there was not a lot of stuff which I could honestly say rough. You really need to have in here. So one of the cards I put on there was Wrathwood Larch, and honestly, like, it's a nice one to have for newer players, but if you can get Chlorophylla, you want Chlorophylla over this card. I originally got super excited about this card when it first came out. It's definitely a draft pickup just because it does things early game, it does things late game. It's a nice 4/6 body for what it is. The problem is that Chlorophylla puts you a turn ahead, whereas this just puts a wild shard in your hand. Now, I do also like that you can play it with any resource to put that wild shard in your hand, so it does fix you, and you can put it in your graveyard, maybe with Winter Moon. You can cycle it back in and do other things. But Wrathwood Larch it's a nice staple to have. It's you know, honestly, we just ran dry on things that we could pick out. Next one, scrolling down through some of the commons that we've got to look at. I considered putting Crackling Sprout on there, but it just didn't feel like it was good enough. Nature Reigns. This is one card that's going to see a lot of reserves play, and sometimes even a 1-of main deck play if artifacts and constants are a heavy piece in the meta, which they aren't as much right now. But this is a card that's just solid piece of removal for Wild. There's not a lot of stuff, especially in Blood. If you're playing Blood, like if you happen to be like Blood Wild deck, I don't think there's anything competitive that does that-ish right now, but you know, you can have this in your deck, and now you've got something that Blood does really poorly covered in your Wild Shard. Plus, it does it at quick action speed, and we kind of already touched on the importance of that. Moving on, we had... what else was the other one? Not Wild Growth. Howling Brave is probably your #1 common in Wild. It's again, it's just a ramp. It's really cheap ramp. You play it on turn 1. You can play something for for 3 on turn 2, which could put you far enough ahead in a lot of races to win the races, especially when your opponent goes down to 6 cards and they keep a bad hand, or maybe they keep like a greedy hand and they have 2 shards in it and they play those first 2 shards and they just can't really get anything going. Howling Brave can put you so far ahead of your opponent that, you know, you just win the game just because you're just much faster at playing really big cards. And that's always how cards like that have been. Then we had Sensei and Lithe Lyrist. Were the ones that Duck brought up to me. So Lithe Lyrist is another one where it's like, it's really not a tier 1 or tier 2-ish card, but it may be in some sort of an elf shell where you're playing lots and lots of elves. Maybe it could do something. I did play it for a little while in like an elf ball type of deck. It does give you that extra resource, so if you can't afford Chlorophylla for some reason, you can get Lithe Lyrist, and that will definitely fill that hole for you. And then finally, Moonaro Sensei is a throwback to a lot of when we only had set 1. Enters play, you draw a card. Still nice for like the combo. It chump blocks for you. You can put it in your graveyard, maybe cycle it in somehow or do something else with it. It does move you through the deck and help you. It's going to help you hopefully get to those big threats. But it again, just it's kind of dropped off. Duck, what do you think?
I think as far as Howling Brave being the top, I completely agree. I think for every person that says that, you know, there's going to be that 1 resource for 2 damage situation, you're always going to have basically what amounts to the troop version, which is a 1 resource troop for a guy that makes a resource. I feel like almost with these wild commons that you look at them and you go, maybe someday in the future. Like, I feel like,
Yeah.
like, you know, like the Lithe Lyricist will be, you know, good if there is like an elf, you know, an elf deck. And with Larch, I think he really will be a card that maybe in 2 or 3 sets, maybe a year, 2 years, that there might be something in blood with, like, you know, Crypt, bringing stuff back from the Crypt, like, and like a lot of things back from the Crypt that you could say, man, Larch is a great card now because you can pay 2 resource, get another resource, and just put it right into the Crypt to revive. You know, it's like one of those cards that, you know, maybe someday, but yeah. I think it's by far the Howling Brave is just, you know, is the king of common for Wild.
So we only had about 4 or 5 cards on most of these lists, and we were really scrimping. With Wild, honestly, only 2 of those cards should probably be in a lot of decks, which given Nature Reigns and Howling Brave. The Sapphire is the king of commons because we came up with about 8 cards. 8 cards, which you need to have 4 of in your collection because they fit in so many different shells. And so I'm just going to go over them in no particular order. So the first one that we're seeing up is Oracle Song. Oracle Song just simply draws you 2 cards, and we've seen this see a lot of play in the Winter Moon decks. Most of the time you're probably going to play this in some sort of a control shell or something where it is that you're going to try to maybe draw to something like a combo deck where you're trying to get something to go, some sort of action going on. Especially in Winter Moon, when you shuffle this back in, the next time you play it, it draws you 3 cards because Winter Moon adds the draw card to it. That seems pretty ridiculous. 3 for 3 cards is pretty crazy. On to Counter Magic. Again, this is your straight up answer to every card in the game right now. There are no uncounterable cards currently in Hex, and we're not sure if there will be some in the future. We do know that Hex Entertainment have said that they're going to make sure that Counter Magic, there's not too much Counter Magic in the game, because that can be a negative play experience for players when it is that someone just sits back and I try to play cards and someone's just like, nope, 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 and
draw, go.
Nope, because I feel like it. Yeah, you're just basically like, am I even playing the game at this point? Yeah, so that's, unfortunately, that becomes a negative play experience. So I think there's just the right amount of Counter Magic in the game right now. This will probably actually get reprinted in the future is what I would expect to see. Buccaneer has been the king of bounce since set 1, and he's still there. So if you don't have Buccaneer, you got to really ask yourself why, especially if you want to play Sapphire. This is a card that you need to have 4 of. Bounces those troops, put them back in your opponent's hand, and then your opponent may not even be able to play them, and now you're swinging for 2 on the following turn. That's going to make your opponent pretty demoralized. That's just like the long and short of it. Next we have Time Ripple. Time Ripple is another bounce card. Not one of my favorites. It's nice because you can quick action speed in response to your opponent's attack phase, which is a big deal because if I cast this on my turn, then my opponent just simply recasts their card on their turn, putting their troop back into play or their constant or whatever, and that's really the wrong time to play it. So if you aren't responding to your opponent or playing it in their end step, then you're probably playing this card wrong. You haven't really realized the power of Time Ripple. Next, we've got Verdict of the Ancient Kings, which is like Duck was saying, kind of like the younger brother of Counter Magic. Only counters half of the ish cards that are out there. You have to target non-troop cards. It's seen one of play just because Vampire Princess is so prevalent in the meta right now, and Verdict of the Ancient Kings ends up being a card that you're stuck within your hand and it just turns into a Vampire Kiss. And so that's why it's seeing a lot less play than it used to. But it's still very, very useful. Arcane Focus is like a must for. If you don't, again, if this is another one where if you don't have this card and you're playing Sapphire, you really have to ask yourself what you're doing wrong, because it's going to do so much for you. In your turn one, you're going to be able to take a look at your hand and get that extra resource, so that way you can continue playing the game, or you're going to be able to get to the card that's going to be able to answer your opponent. A lot of people, when they look at cards like this, I've also seen people say turn one play is not the best with it, which is kind of interesting to think about, because if it's game one and your opponent hasn't even played a card yet, a lot of people will like to wait to play this card so that way they can pick the right card to answer their opponent, especially if you're playing some sort of a control deck. So that's another heavy, interesting way to think about Arcane Focus. That might be something that's a little bit difficult. Duck's pick was Thunderfield Seer, just because it buffs all of the actions in your deck and gets them to draw those extra cards. And I've had some success with this in a constructed sense with the Winter Moon deck again. And Thunderbird was the last one, which I kind of passed over there. Thunderbird has been around since set 1. There's not as much burn or other cards that deal very well with it right now in the meta, and so Thunderbird may be ready to come back, or maybe 2 of in the reserves. But if you're a commons player and you're trying to play a competitive deck and you're playing something in Sapphire where you're doing a lot of tempo, which means I just bounce things from my opponent's hand to push damage, Thunderbird just, I mean, he wins the game in 5 turns by himself. Or herself, I can't tell. So Duck, thoughts please, and then so we can get to this deck doctor. We have 16 minutes to do the deck doctor.
Absolutely. As it was indicated to us by Heather, Walking Calamity can't be interrupted. I don't know that I'd argue for Nature's Resolve. I understand that it makes the next thing uninterruptible, but you can interrupt Nature's Resolve, so I don't know that that's much of a, you know what I mean? It's not much of an argument. But man,
Right.
The commons across Sapphire are just, I think they're just top to bottom outrageous. We didn't even name like Epiphany, which you see a one of in Winter Moon. Just Gearsmith if you're playing like a dwarf list. You know, the commons are just fantastic. I think, you know, as far as your one resource like staple Arcane Focus is Sapphires, whereas, you know, you have like the Howling Brave and the Burn. But man, it's incredible how strong the common slot is for Sapphire compared to all the other shards. It just seems almost completely like the balance is just off to me after we were looking at it. It's just crazy.
Okay, so we're going to build an episode 95 deck. So I think we're going to go with Duck's suggestion and try to build something that's going to be Ruby Blood. We got a very limited time to do this. We got about 15 minutes, so we just kind of have to really speed through this. So I will probably do a better job, and I'll build a second deck for Epic Spirit after this. I also had another deck I was playing recently this last week where I splashed Ruby into Winter Moon, and that was pretty fun. Played some things in there too. So let's see. We are probably going to go ahead and just go the Darkspire route. So that's easy enough, right? Maybe play what's his name again? We played him in the what's his name champion?
Bunoshi,
yeah. B-U-N. Bunoshi the Ruthless. So this is going to allow us, sometimes your opponent's going to be like, oh, you're playing Darkspire. Well, I'm not going to kill your Darkspire. I'm not even going to block him. I'm not going to worry about it. So you have to play Bunoshi so that way you can sacrifice him to get those effects off of your Darkspire guys. And then you can buff the other Darkspire guys, and they can do a better job than 2/2s and 2/1s at blocking things or attacking, etc., etc. We'll go ahead and throw Fury the Mountain God in here as well. So we're kind of building this Orc Blood Shell. Let's go ahead and get all the Darkspire in here. That's a pretty easy choice. Go ahead.
I feel like the other champion you could make an argument for these two the shard combination is maybe Sir Giles, since it seems like everything's going to be Orc. But I feel like you were absolutely correct that you need a sacrifice outlet for your Darkspires, since they are kind of the center of the deck.
I could see that. I could see Giles. Like, that might be more interesting. It just depends on how much Ruby we get in the deck, honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's the big deciding factor as to champions there. With those,
it's just as far as another option, if he just doesn't like Bunoshi, newer players, sacrifice effects and newer players sometimes don't mesh very well.
Sure.
So maybe you just want to go that like full 100, like 0 to 100 aggro list, which I think Giles might be a little bit more suited for a player of that style.
Could play Ambusher in here, but that's not really an Orc, so maybe we want to keep it at Orcs, especially if you're playing Giles. But Ambusher is pretty good. We'll throw ahead the kills in here. That's an easy choice.
You could play Fang of the Mountain, the 2/2 for 1 that hits you. He's a pretty good option.
Is he uncommon?
I believe so.
Fang. Yeah, we could play Fang. Yeah, he's uncommon. That's a nice 1-drop for you. I mean, that might be more interesting is just go Giles, but right now we don't have any Ruby. We've got the human, what's it called? Human. So I do like the fact that we can sacrifice guys and then pump our human, because a lot of the abilities on the Highlands Blackbelt go off of her strength.
Yeah. No, I think that's an excellent argument for using Bunoshi as well, not only to activate your Darkspire, but man, that would be quite the trick to sacrifice your Darkspire guy, get that effect, put it on the Highlands Blackbelt, and then throw the spell at him. That seems like it could be fun.
Yeah. I went ahead and threw some Ruby Pyromancer in here, and Ruby
that's
Pyromancer
a
is
good
another
choice.
one that combos well with Black Belt and will combo with all of your Orcs.
Oh yeah, it hits like everything but Fang at this point, the cards we looked at.
Yeah. We definitely want a play set of burn in here because we're playing aggro. The reason why people aren't playing as much burn these days is because it doesn't deal very well with what's her name, the Vampire Princess. But for the most part, like if your opponent plays a Vampire Princess, you're probably just going to dump out all your burns and just go straight to the face, or you'll double burn the princess to kill it. You'll have to take the negative card advantage there.
Well, sometimes you just need the reach of burn, which is just throwing it at the champion,
Right,
which is
exactly.
it's always an option. It's always a good option. You could maybe even throw like a burn to the ground or two just to have the reach. Right. For a newer player, he might just need, if the board gets gummed up with just troops, at least you have a draw to kill them.
Right, yeah. Late in the game, burn to the ground is, of course, another great card to have in your deck. Let's see where we're at right now. 11 minutes right now left in the episode. I do try to keep these at an hour. I'm very, very staunch about that hour. So I feel like most people have limits. People have limits.
That's just it seems like the day and age with people's attention spans right there at about an hour.
Yeah, about an hour. Even that's pushing it. Honestly, like when I post these to YouTube, I know that most YouTube videos are like 5 to 10 minutes. So,
yeah, that seems about the rate of people's attention from start to finish.
And most people are probably watching YouTube videos when they're on the John anyways, so that's probably about the time they spend on the John. So,
I mean, if you're spending an hour there.
Yeah, if you're spending an hour there, I mean, thanks for watching the show, but you might want to go
consult a doctor.
You should probably go get that checked out.
We're
actually almost there already with this deck. Like, as far as having something that's solid, I'm going to go ahead and throw Ambusher in here too, because so this is a card that I want to have in here with a rare card, which may be a little bit expensive, and that is, what's his name? He goes underground. The one you can sacrifice. The little bunny guy. The one that keeps coming back.
The Grave Nibbler? No, Minion of Yakuza?
Yakuzan. Yeah, we want Yakuzan in here. So I know this card is rare, and I think I might just look through my collection and see how many of these I have. If I have some spare ones, I might just throw some at them. But let's look at what the cost is on this card for a newer player. So about $3, which is a little bit more than a pack of cards. Or, well, it's $2 is what it's showing. Oh, wait, 2p? Is that right? That doesn't make sense. No, that's the ring. I hate it when the thing gets in my way.
Yeah.
It is, okay, $2. It's $2 or 27,000 gold. This card is going to have a lot of reach for you because your opponent's just going to have fits with it. They have to have very specific removal for it, and like typically everyone's running either a burn spell or kill or something like that. They're not running anything that exhausts them and you know, pulls them down like that. And so the problem with him is he doesn't block for you, but again, you can pump him with Bunoshi and he just comes back, and now he's a 3/3, and then when he keeps coming back, he gets bigger and bigger. I prefer to actually play this guy on turn 1 and not bury him on turn 2 because
No,
I feel like...
Yeah, I agree. I rarely see a reason to be tunneling this guy when he can just come right out and be annoying from start to finish.
Oh, yeah. Your opponent's going to block him early, probably, or maybe like mid game, and then eventually he just keeps coming back. So other cards that you could consider for a deck like this that I've played in the past that I built last 2 weeks ago. Inquisitor is another one, maybe a little bit more expensive for the new player. Inquisitor is actually about the same price, $2 for Inquisitor. So especially as a set 1 card, this is a card that's going to keep coming back. Maybe just get 1 because it costs 4.
Sure.
It's at the top of your range, kind of. So, yeah.
I mean, at worst for a newer player, you could look at something like a combination of Reactor Bot with Crackling Bolts, just to have something, you know, a little bit techier for a new player, and that it seems relatively simple to figure out how they work together, and it's not so bad for an aggressive early deck for in somebody's career of playing Hex.
And we didn't talk about the shards, but having a 4 of all the basic uncommon dual shards is kind of a must if you want to play competitive. So this is something you kind of have to build up. Most of these looks like are going for about 20 cents or 2,800 gold. They're all set 2, so they're a little bit tougher to get a hold of than they used to be when set 2 was in the draft. But there is that. You could go with Shards of Fate, which is much cheaper, and I think the what is it? The PvE content is actually giving these away.
Yeah, the campaign gives it to you in like the pack for the Necrotic, I believe.
Right. And so that's acceptable for a little while, but you're definitely going to want the charge off of the dual shard because it does the same thing and it gives you the charge, which is a really big deal. So we're looking at probably 23 shards for this one, a typical aggro build. I'm gonna fix the shards after, so when I post this to YouTube, I'll fix it for that. Let's see where it's 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I need to have 2 more. Actually, we're probably more on the blood side.
Yeah, it looked like it from the ratio up there on the top.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have to start making our cuts. So this is typically, again, how my methodology in building decks is. I will add an idea, add a bunch of different things that maybe fit that idea, and then start pulling things out that really don't fit the idea, or maybe that I don't actually own, stuff like that. So it looks like our curve actually isn't that bad. You know, we've got the 3 and the 4 range at 8 and 4 cards. Maybe the 3 range, bring it down maybe a card. The 8 range is not really an 8 range because the Fury of the Mountain God, the way he works, it says when a troop you control deals damage, if this is in your hand, it gets cost -1. So he's kind of like your end game bomb anyway. So if you're playing this guy, you could be playing him, or you could be playing Burn to the Ground. The difference is that Fury of the Mountain God is going to give you a little bit more reach, a nice blocker if you need that, something on that end. Plus you got the Darkspire Tyrant, which also could end your games for you when you have all the Darkspire cards in your deck. And then Darkspire cards, I guess the nice thing about them is it's like virtual draw off of things. So if a Darkspire Punisher dies, your opponent could sack a card, which is disruption, of course, or they could end up, or you could end up drawing more Darkspire cards to block them with and do other things.
Yeah, well, you don't get to control the effect. It is kind of nice to have, you know, even though you don't control the options, having options is always good.
Yeah. So probably the thing I'm seeing here is, that I don't like the most, honestly, is Fang of the Mountain God. And here's my reasoning. If we choose Bunoshi, he's already starting off at 18 health, which is not a great place to be. I know that Fang of the Mountain God combos with our Fury of the Mountain God, but the problem is I think that Fang of the Mountain God may kill us more often than he's going to help us.
I'll agree with that, especially because Minion is just the. I think Minion is the superior one, the one drop in this. Yeah, it works well with the ability, both as the target of sacrifice and as the target of the pump.
We're actually basically at a decent deck build here, so I'm going to leave it at this. Our 4-drops actually aren't even 4-drops. They're actually these Ambushers, which most of the time you're going to play for 2. The other cool thing about Ambusher that combos really well in this deck is with Minion. If you have Minion in play on turn 1, then turn 2 you play an Ambusher, you bury it. And then later on you sacrifice Minion to buff something. That buffs your Ambusher, making it a 3/2. Or even bigger if you can sacrifice multiple things or get them killed somehow. That Ambusher is going to kill a lot bigger stuff for you, which is a big deal. Other things that I've played in the past are, as far as in the rare range, have been, what's his name, the other bunny? The big bunny.
Monsoon?
Monsoon. Monsoon is going to be pretty expensive.
Super expensive.
But if you happen to pull them in a pack, or if this is something you want to try out, maybe get 1 or 2 of them, try them out first. But he is pretty super expensive at about $16. 124,000 gold is pretty expensive. Definitely have in your reserves, have some Inquisition though. Inquisition there's a case to be made to have this main decked for you. And then of course we talked about Inquisitor already, so that's pretty much the deck. We built that deck in like 16 minutes, just saying. I feel pretty good right
quick.
now.
That was speed run.
That was speed run deck building. Speed run. But this would be something basic that he could take some of the rares he already has and build something that's going to be reasonably good. Is this a tier 2 deck? Not really. Could it beat tier 2 and tier 1 decks? Yes, it could. You have to play it fairly tightly, and you're going to need to still go out there and do your research on tier 1 and tier 2 decks so you know what they typically run, so that way you know how to respond to things and what to do in those situations. So the odds aren't exactly with you with this sort of a thing, but that's kind of how it is when you're getting into playing card games. Anything else to add there?
I think it looks kind of fun, honestly, and that's really what it comes down to for a newer player. Like they're looking to have fun, so if you can give them something that they enjoy, that's really the best way to start about getting someone into any game.
Oh yeah, for sure. So we're gonna go ahead and close out the episode here, and of course stick around for the giveaways after the show. Tonight in Decking with the Squire, I had Ducklett, also known as Duck, on the show, and he gave me this awesome picture to show you guys, and he's looking down at me right now, so you can see that right now. And then we talked about the news, some of the Reddit, the fact that Reddit is now at 3,000 viewers. That's kind of a big deal. Some of the top comments, my personal picks for top comments. So if you have some other ones that you think that I missed, please let me know in the YouTube comments, or I guess if you're on live right now, you could yell them out to me or something. And we talked about the Infinity Engine. We congratulated Coma. Again, congratulations, Coma, on your $40,000. I believe he was going to put it all on black, but then he changed his mind, and he's going to do the responsible thing and, I don't know, put it into his house or something like that. And then, of course, we close things out with building this deck for Epic Spirit. So I hope that he likes this deck. He's going to get something. I'm sure I'll probably give him either a draft pack or get him some of the cards he needs to build this deck. I do try to hook up some of the people that submit decks to me with something nice, because you guys took time to actually build something and contribute to my show. So I, of course, like to give back to you. And that was pretty much it for tonight. So Yeah. Until next time, this is Aaron Squire signing off, saying God bless your families. Trying to rage too much out there, and Ducklett. I don't know if you have a phrase yet. You should get one.
No, not yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
All right. Ducklett needs to get a catchphrase, so that's my catchphrase, and that means the show is over.